On a windless September morning, a volunteer named Jonah Calvert pried open a warped map tube he had pulled from the rafters of a condemned boathouse on Lake Harlow. Dust billowed, a faint mushroom that smelled like wet rope and old sunscreen. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper, sun-browned at the edges, covered in pencil lines that looked frantic and careful at the same time. Trails, arrows, handwritten notes that said things like "Do not camp here and check head count twice." In the bottom corner, a coffee ring overlapped a little sketch of a dragonfly. He spread the paper on the floor and felt the boards give a sleepy groan under his knees. The map was not official. It was the kind of map you make when you have to shepherd kids through the woods in the dark and you do not trust the glossy brochure. Near the lake, a bold line marked Red Trail. Off that line, a faint dotted curve drifted toward a cluster of skinny ovals labeled birch teeth. Farther still, someone had put a pencil X and written 2 words in small, careful letters. Never again. Jonah was supposed to be hauling out mildewed life vests and a pile of bent lawn chairs. He was not supposed to be unrolling mysteries. But anyone who had lived in Harlow for more than a season knew what Red Trail meant. 25 years ago, a 12-year-old camper named Tess Whitaker vanished during an overnight hike. There had been a storm that moved like a train. There had been flashlights like little islands. There had been a head count that was 1 short. Search teams had dragged the lake, brought in dogs, walked shoulder to shoulder until their shins bled from ferns. Nothing. The camp shut down that fall. The case sat on a shelf and gathered the kind of dust that no one wants to breathe. Jonah had been 7 the day Tess disappeared. He remembered the posters on the grocery store door and the way mothers squeezed the hands of their kids as if the space between the cereal aisle and the freezer could swallow them. He had grown up and become the kind of adult who reads topo lines the way other people read faces. He did part-time land survey work. He volunteered with search and rescue, which is to say he did not believe in secrets that stay buried just because time rolls over them like leaves. He took the map to the one person in town who would not roll their eyes. Detective Mara Rowan had been a uniformed rookie when the Whitaker search clogged every dirt road with trucks and burned the word closure out of the vocabulary. She opened the boathouse office door with a look that said she had been dragged to see 100 supposed clues, and she would be polite anyway. Jonah pushed the paper across the desk and watched her eyes shift from bored to awake to still. "Where did you get this?" she asked. Jonah told her about the rafters, the warp tube, the dragonfly. She ran a finger over the dotted curve off Red Trail. "That is not on any of our maps," she said. He pointed at the birch teeth note and the tiny X that read "Never again." She nodded and kept nodding like someone who had just felt a floor tilt. They studied the margins. There were symbols that did not match Park Service standards. A double-dashed arrow labeled flow. A little square made of 4 ticks with the letters C and P beside it. No legend. No initialing. But down by the crease there was a name so faint you had to tilt the page to catch it. Maya C. The letter C trailed off as if her pencil had caught on a splinter. Maya Callow had been 19 in the summer of '98. A second-year counselor who was good at braiding hair and sneaking extra marshmallows and keeping the rowdiest kids from tipping canoes. On the day before the hike, she had walked the route alone at dusk and had come back with her socks wet and her mouth set in a line her friends did not recognize. She had told the director the lower ridge sounded hollow when she stamped it. He had said storms make the woods talk. She had drawn her own map that night in the staff cabin and tucked it under her mattress. The official timeline said Tess vanished near the campfire ring when a gust knocked ash into the sky and the kids covered their eyes. It said the group had not strayed. It said there were no abandoned wells or mines or sinkholes within a reasonable radius. Official timelines are tidy. The map on Detective Rowan's desk was not tidy. It suggested water went where paper maps did not, that a storm could turn a dry crease in the ground into a moving throat, and that someone had been worried enough to write "never again" before there was even a first time. Rowan borrowed a scanner from the library, grabbed a sandwich from the deli, and took the digital file back to her office as if hurrying home with a rescued bird. She pulled up a county elevation model and a set of LiDAR tiles the state had flown 2 springs ago and dragged Maya's pencil lines over the bright candy ribbon of the terrain. The dotted curve matched a shallow depression that looked like a shrug in the hill. That shrug continued under a veil of young pines toward the old service road and the ghost of a culvert that had supposedly been removed in the '70s. She called Jonah. They parked by the locked gate and hiked in with a probe rod, a camera, and a taped photocopy of the map that flapped against Rowan's leg. The strap caught light. Rowan found the birch teeth first. A small stand of white trunks clustered like ribs on a slope that sloughed toward the service road. The needles underfoot were soft enough to swallow a boot print. She pressed the probe rod through moss and felt it kiss stone, then slip another 5 inches without resistance. Jonah set his palm on the ground and felt a faint, cool breath coming up through the duff, as if the hill were leaking. When he pushed his ear close, he heard a distant trickle, a tiny winter-in-a-pipe sound that did not belong in September. Under a mat of fern stems they found a rim of old concrete disguised with bark and leaf litter. Someone had once cut a square into the hillside and laid stones like teeth around a mouth, then forgotten the mouth existed. A rusted grate lay half-buried a few feet downslope, its bars bent by years of freeze and thaw. Rowan brushed dirt from a corner and read the ghost of a stamp. County Drainage, 1971. She looked at Jonah and then at the map flapping against her leg. The little square of 4 ticks. C and P. They cleared brush from the grate and slid it sideways enough to open a dark slot that exhaled the breath Jonah had felt in the soil. The smell was iron and root, the kind that coats the back of your tongue. Jonah fed their cheap snake camera into the slot and watched the phone screen bloom with gray grain. Then a tunnel ribbed with corrugation and furred with roots. 10 feet in, water pooled black and still. 20 feet in, the view swam with silt and little white air bells that trembled when the lens nudged them. At 27 feet, the picture steadied on something that did not belong to the pipe at all. A sliver of color lodged under a root. Red, sun-faded but still stubborn against gray. Rowan froze the frame and pinched the screen. The edge had stitching. It looked like the corner of a nylon strap, the kind sewn to a day-pack shoulder. Beneath it, a glint like a fish scale winked and then settled. Jonah swallowed. Rowan did not say the name they were both hearing in their heads. She only said quietly, "Mark that distance." They backed away, replaced the grate, and took 3 steps up the slope to get cell reception. Within an hour, county search and rescue trucks lined the service road. A public works foreman scraped his knuckles clearing around the mouth. State police taped the approach and laid tarps for tools. Someone strung a tarp line to keep needles from raining into the work pit. Rowan briefed the team with the map on her clipboard, and the word culvert moved along the line like a chill. They worked slow because ground that hides voids can swallow people too. They dug back by hand until stone teeth showed, then boxed the sides with shoring. When they slid the grate free again and widened the opening, light pushed into the pipe like a blade. The foreman eased the snake cam farther than Jonah had dared, calling out footage in a steady voice while a trooper wrote each number. At 31 feet, the lens drifted over a tangle of clothing and a pale curve that made everyone on the screen go still. The curve was not bone. It was plastic, cloudy with scratches. A whistle. They used a vacuum dredge to sip silt from around the tangle, working an inch at a time. Bits of leaf and bark pattered onto the tarps. A shoelace emerged, knotted the way adults teach kids, the loop-on-loop kind. Then a bracelet of letter beads surfaced, strung on elastic gone brown. The letters were the bright things left in that dark. TESS. The trooper who had been writing the numbers closed his eyes and then started writing again. They stopped narrating out loud. The camera angle stayed wide. The work hummed low and respectful. Late light slanted through the birches by the time the recovery team had the pipe cleared enough to reach with gloved hands. They lifted what they could inside a canvas cradle, slid everything onto the tarps, and covered it as if tucking someone in. A forensic anthropologist stepped forward, her mouth a thin line that could have been either grief or focus. She pointed to a zipper pull engraved with a company logo that had gone out of business in the early 2000s. She pointed to growth on bone that suggested a 12-year-old. She nodded once. The next days were a slow untying of knots. DNA confirmed what the bracelet had already told them. The medical examiner found no evidence of assault, no broken bones that did not belong to a fall, no marks that meant human hands. What she did find was silt in the airway and a line of mineral on the inner surface of a rib, the signature of water standing where lungs had tried to pull air. It was the storm, Rowan said, not because storms choose, but because water takes the one path we forget to draw. News crews came and asked about culverts and responsibility and how an entire town could miss a square hole in a hill for a quarter century. Rowan showed them the LiDAR stripers and the maintenance records that went missing after the camp closed and then reappeared in a banker's box when the county clerk retired. There was a line item from 1971 that read remove pipe. Backfill, seed. Someone had backfilled. No one had removed. The pipe had rotted, the ground had bridged, the trail had been rerouted, and then a new map forgot the old map existed. Maya Callow came back quietly, touched the paper where her name trailed, and whispered, "I tried." Jonah framed the map for the boathouse wall. Lake wind lifted, and the birches finally stopped whispering.